I'd like to thank Dr. Unikrishnan and the team for inviting me to give a talk today. What I'm going to talk to you is about how type 1 diabetes forms de novo when you're treating somebody for cancer. This is something that has happened that has surprised everybody and also helped us open our eyes to how type 1 diabetes develops. So you might all wonder, what is checkpoint inhibition treatment for cancer? So just to give you a little bit of knowledge on checkpoint inhibition. This is the two guys, James Allison and Toshiko Honjo, who won the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 2018. And what they did was they had antibodies that will go and block some molecules. And by blocking some molecules, what results is activation of T cells. What happens when the T cells are activated is they go and kill the cancer cells. So this was started with one form of cancer, breast cancer, and slowly it started to be applied on all forms of cancer. The resultant outcome is the metastasis vanished, the cancer size became smaller and smaller, and the cancer got cured. So this is one of the first forms of immunotherapy for cancer that was developed some time ago, independently by two scientists in different parts of the world, that led them to this remarkable discovery. So this is what helped them get the prize. And if you look at what is the prize, you see that in prostate cancer, in chemotherapy, in bone marrow transplantation for leukemia, there have been previous Nobel Prizes. Whereas in the immune system, as the immune chemotherapy, there weren't many, and this is one of the ones that got the prize. So when you look at the accelerators or the brakes in our immune system, the fundamental property of your immune system is ability to discriminate self and non-self. Okay, but in additional proteins acting as T cell accelerators are also required to trigger a full-blown immune response, which I will describe in a cartoon in the next slide. So this intricate balance between accelerators and brakes is essential for tight control and for normal well-being of individuals. If you look at this particular cartoon, you will see that the most important part for an antigen-presenting cell and a T cell to interact and for this T cell to behave normally. Whereas if you have an antibody that goes and blocks the CTLA4 that is important for this interaction, this normal dormant T cell gets activated. That is called as release of the brake, and this activated T cell goes and knocks off the tumor cell. So this was the discovery that was made by Jim Allison that got him the Nobel Prize. The other half of the Nobel Prize was by Toshiko Honjo. He did not touch the CTLA4, but he touched the molecule called PD-1 or programmed cell death 1 molecule, which binds to a ligand called PD-L1 ligand. So by blocking the interaction of PD-1 with anti-PD-1 antibodies or with anti-PD ligand 1 antibodies, this particular reaction was not allowed to happen. When you did not allow this reaction to happen, the resultant thing is that the T cells gets activated, and this activated T cells go and knock off the cancer cells. This could be used individually, and it has happened subsequently from their discoveries that they try to combine the anti-PD-1 antibodies and anti-CTLA1 antibodies to cure cancer. So this form has been extremely successful in terms of curing cancer. So this came to light the new principle for immunotherapy, and the T cell protein CTLA4 is an important aspect of this immune therapy. The CTLA4 functions as a brake on T cells. So Allison, however, had an entirely different idea. He had already developed an antibody that could bind to CTLA4, and this accelerated his research by blocking the CTLA4 and getting the T cells to get activated as an activated T cells. So they did the experiment, and over the period of time, they did the clinical trial to show that this particular antibody is helping them cure cancer, and they started to put their patients on this treatment as early as 2010. Whereas when you look at the other, Toshiko Honjo's discovery, the discovery of PD-1 antibody and its importance in cancer therapy, he developed antibody to PD-1, another protein expressed on the surface of T cells, and the results showed that PD-1, similar to CTLA-4, functions as a T cell brake. So by blocking the PD-1 with a PD-1 antibody, you release the brake resulting in the destruction of the cancer cells. So this is a fundamental and remarkable discovery, and they were able to prove in the animal experiments the PD-1 blockade was also shown to be a promising strategy to fight against cancer. Then over a period of time by 2012, this has become a mainstay for treatment of cancer patients. So even though this was proved to be important in cancer immunotherapy, they were able to get the Nobel Prize only in 2018. So that was the birth of what is called as immune checkpoint therapy for cancer today. And there have been quite a number of antibodies, either mouse, human, hybrid, or totally human antibody that could go and target these molecules, with the result that the activated T cells allow or created to allow the destruction of cancer cells. Why am I talking all this in detail? You will realize that there is a very important overlap of what the activated T cells can do to insulin-producing beta cells. So every treatment, you have something called as immune-related adverse event. And for the checkpoint inhibition therapy, the immune-related adverse event was development of type 1 diabetes. Nobody expected that. So the T cells that are getting activated, that goes and destroys the cancer cells, results in the same T cells going and destroying the insulin-producing beta cells. So this is where it becomes very interesting for the diabetologist, so that if you know the mechanism, and if you have a patient suddenly developing diabetic ketoacidosis, and please remember, these are not young children that where you will normally find type 1 diabetes taking place, you will have to think that in these patients, the therapy with immune checkpoint inhibition is probably the cause of the diabetes. So just to give you a little bit of a background, what happens normally is you have a T cell receptor, you have a HLA molecule, and you have an antigen that is processed and presented on the HLA molecule for T cells to see. And when this peptide is shown to the T cells decide whether it is a self-peptide or a foreign peptide. And if it is a foreign peptide, it gets activated. If it is a self-peptide, it doesn't get activated. This is the normal immune response. So when this interaction takes place, you also have another interaction with CTLA-4 and B7 molecule, and PD-1 with PD ligand 1 molecule. This is what normally happens, and nothing happens to the T cells. They do not get activated. But the two discoveries that these guys got the Nobel Prize for, one for blocking CTLA-4 antibody, another for blocking PD-1 as well as PD ligand 1 antibody, two different antibodies, you are able to allow a T cell that does not get activated now to get activated. And these are some of the indications for which these forms of immunotherapy are extremely interesting and working. And if these are all the antibodies, some of them you cannot even pronounce them the way they are named. These are all commercially available antibodies. And if you can see, the PD-1 inhibitor and PD ligand 1 inhibitors are the ones that predominantly cause type 1 diabetes compared to the CTLA-4 inhibitors. So when you look at the clinical features of diabetes induced by the checkpoint inhibitors, you tend to see that the new onset diabetes in the elderly, or dramatic increase in the insulin requirement in a patient with known type 2 diabetes. The incidence is close to 1%. So almost 1% of all the patients receiving checkpoint inhibition therapy develop type 1 diabetes. It could happen in a 60-year-old or a 70-year-old. It could happen in individuals who already have type 2 diabetes and all their beta cells can get knocked out. So at age 60 or 70, they can develop type 1 diabetes on top of type 2 diabetes. Or if they do not have type 2 diabetes, they can just develop type 1 diabetes at any particular age group. The rapidity with which the type 1 diabetes develops, I will show you in the subsequent slide. So the median time of diagnosis is 20 weeks from the start of treatment. There is one other form of diabetes that's prevalent in Japan called fulminant diabetes. And in fulminant diabetes, from the time of onset, within 2 weeks, all the beta cells are destroyed, and they have a classical presentation of diabetic ketoacidosis presenting to the hospital in an emergency clinic. And the time of development of diabetes there and here is so short, not all of them develop autoantibodies, especially to GAD or IA2 or zinc transporter. So they frequently, these patients who are treated with checkpoint inhibitors, they frequently present with diabetic ketoacidosis, and the average HbA1c is 8.1, not very large as you would see in other situations. May or may not have antibodies because the time it takes to develop or for complete beta cell destruction does not allow enough time for antibodies to form. They have pancreatitis. There is the increase in pancreatic enzymes in many of them. Other autoimmune endocrinopathies are also present, 4 out of 17 with thyroid dysfunction and 1 out of 17 had hypophysitis. So slowly more and more patients are getting type 1 diabetes, are all getting into a registry where they are trying to look at commonalities between them. So no family history of autoimmune diabetes, but frequently a family history of autoimmune disease. They might have rheumatoid arthritis or so many other different autoimmune disease will be there in the family history. But remember, it can happen at any age group. That is something that is important. So it rapidly progresses to undetectable level of C-peptide, and it does not appear that steroids will prevent complete loss of beta cell function. Recovery of beta cell is very uncommon. They are all gone. So the only way you will have to restore glycemic control is for giving external insulin. Glucose liability is consistent with absolute insulin deficiency, and it's generally or more seen in patients who are treated with anti-PD-1 antibodies or anti-PD ligand 1 antibodies, either alone or in combination. So this is the outcome. So this is something people have to remember. If you're seeing a diabetic patient, it's important to know whether they have been treated. So when you look a little deeper into what's happening, you see that in some of the preliminary studies that had happened in the cases that had developed diabetes, GAD65 antibodies were seen in 9 out of 25. In CPI-treated patients without diabetes, GAD is present in 2 out of 12. So you also have IA2 antibodies, which is tyrosine phosphatase, zinc transporter antibodies. ICA is not usually measured. In those that are measured, it was present 2 out of 50. So what it clearly shows is there is autoimmune tendency, but the time it takes for GAD antibody formation or any of these autoantibody formation is rather limited. But when we look at the HLA of all these patients who have developed type 1 diabetes secondary to the checkpoint inhibition treatment, you find that many of them are DR4 positive, which is classically the HLA that's associated with type 1 diabetes. So there is a genetic susceptibility, there is autoantibody formation, clearly indicating that the autoimmune basis results in the development of autoimmune diabetes, which is how we should categorize this. So when you look at some of the case reports that have appeared, the immune checkpoint inhibitors such as pembrolizumab, ipilimumab, nivolumab, which are all now approved by FDA for several types of cancer, has been associated with immune-related adverse events and is reported to induce development of type 1 diabetes. When these papers started to get published, everybody were really waking up to the fact that anyone who is treated with checkpoint inhibition therapy needs to be tested for their glycemic control and see how many of them. Sometimes if they come with diabetic ketoacidosis, you might lose the patient. You might have as well lost the patient from the cancer. But when you look at the classic way by which it happens, this is a case in which the treatment was started at week 1, and at week 7, the beta cells are all gone. And in this case, insulin had to be instituted at this particular point, and subsequently the glucose control, as it is shown in the blue chart here, is restored to a reasonable amount of normalcy compared to very high level that is reflective of complete absence of the beta cell. So the time it takes for the complete loss of beta cells is only 6 weeks in this particular patient. So when you look at it a little bit differently, and in this case report, they report 2 cases of rapid onset insulin-dependent type 1 diabetes mellitus in the setting of administration of nivolumab, which is an anti-PD-1 ligand antibody, which is a fully human monoclonal antibody, and also to anti-PD-1 and anti-PD-1 ligand. So this appears to be one of the first report where both these antibodies are together causing this, and they provide a brief summary of the views on how it happens. So these 2 antibodies seems to be much more causative in causing beta cell destruction compared to anti-CTLA-1 antibodies. So of of all the reported cases, something like 42 cases have been reported in just during the year's time since the institution of this form of therapy. And you can find that the most number of cases that developed type 1 diabetes were those who received nivolumab or pembrolizumab. So all these are anti-PD-1, anti-PD-1 ligand antibodies, and there is not much of gender difference. But most of the patients who had received treatment were on the older age group. So the average age of these 43 patients were 63, and you would hardly think of them as a type 1 diabetes candidate if you see them in your clinic. So all these features clearly show that the antibodies are also present, but over a period of time, I think the number of antibodies that would develop would probably increase, and many of them had a personal history of autoimmune disease that is present in them. Just to identify or describe how the mechanism happens, this is a tumor cell. The tumor cell expresses PD-1 ligand, and the PD-1 receptor is present on the T cells, and the HLA and T cell receptor normally combine, and this is the normal engagement that you would see. And in this engagement, the T cells do not kill the tumor cells. But if you were to break this interaction by blocking the PD-1 receptor with anti-PD-1 receptor antibodies, or blocking the PD-1 ligand with anti-PD-1 ligand antibodies, you break this interaction, with the result the T cells get activated and they go and kill the tumor cells. If you extrapolate this and say that the tumor cell is nothing but a pancreatic beta cell, and if you ask the same question, the same interaction does not go and destroy the pancreatic beta cell, but if you were to use these antibodies that will kill the tumor cell, what you see here is the same T cell that gets activated goes and kills the pancreatic beta cell. So in type 1 diabetes, you should know that it is the T cell that's responsible for the destruction of the beta cells, not the antibodies, because the antibodies is a result of the disease, but not the cause of the disease. So what do you do as a clinician? The things that you need to look at is the proposal for this is a chart that had been published that is available for physicians to see. The first thing is to raise the awareness at initiation of checkpoint inhibition therapy. So educate the patients and the healthcare providers about hyperglycemic symptoms in the DKA, extra vigilance for patients with history of autoimmune disease. So this is something that should actually come from the endocrinologist, when the diabetologist is called into the picture at a later stage without knowledge of the checkpoint inhibition therapy, everything is going to go wrong. So the patients with autoimmune disease provide a glucometer in all, measure fasting plasma glucose and the HbA1c at each administration of checkpoint inhibition. But I don't think the HbA1c result is going to be very reflective, because the rapidity with which the beta cells are getting destroyed in a matter of weeks, basically. So the step 3 would be to confirm the diagnosis by measuring C-peptide, and in many occasions antibodies to the beta cells. Sometimes the HLA can also give a clue in terms of development of type 1 diabetes, where these are all classic markers for developing type 1 diabetes. And of course, once you know, start multiple injection of insulin. And this regimen would help you prevent these patients going in for diabetic ketoacidosis, or sometimes lose their life before they could come to the hospital on an emergency setting. So this flow chart is supposed to help people, especially those who are getting started in treatment for checkpoint inhibition therapy for cancer. So basically, you are confronted with the situation: do you want cancer, or you would like to prefer type 1 diabetes? Which of the two do you live with? Of course, cancer is a killer, so you'll have to take care of cancer and save the patient. You can always treat the type 1 diabetes with insulin. So in this particular occasion, this is what happens. And what clearly tells us this, the PD-1, the protein, the programmed cell death protein, is playing a very critical role here in initiation of the beta cell destruction. So the T cells that get activated make sure that they do not get activated and the PD-1 ligand is intact. So recently, I had extrapolated all this knowledge into try and look for type 1 diabetes etiology. In many of the patients, I had got a peptide that has a sequence homology to protein, programmed cell death protein. And many patients, nearly 60-70% of the patients who have developed type 1 diabetes have anti-PD-1 antibodies already present, which means in the natural process of the development of type 1 diabetes, the PD-1 is probably playing a pathogenic role. So the anti-PD-1 pembrolizumab induced autoimmune diabetes in Chinese patients. The reason why I put this up is to show that this particular form of diabetes development is universal. It is not just present in white Caucasian, because DR4, DR3 seems to be more prevalent in white Caucasians, whereas in Chinese population, the DR that is associated with type 1 diabetes is different versus the African population or Japanese population. And you can see here that in Japanese patients, much of the presentation of type 1 diabetes subsequent to checkpoint inhibition therapy seems to resemble very much the fulminant type 1 diabetes. So the fulminant type 1 diabetes, now people who are working on it, now they'll have to wake up to see whether the anti-PD-1 antibodies are probably present or not. That could lead to the etiology of the disease called fulminant type 1 diabetes, predominantly seen in Japan, Korea, and some parts of China close to Japan. So diabetic ketoacidosis induced by single dose of pembrolizumab. So pembrolizumab, what I had showed in the flow chart was at the end of 6 weeks, where there is that's a treatment given at every week. The 6th week they develop. Here a single dose of pembrolizumab, which is anti-PD-1 ligand antibody, seems to be enough to cause destruction of beta cells leading to diabetes. So this is the development of diabetes, but this checkpoint inhibition therapy seems to really wake up a lot of people and try to tell us there is something more to this than what you can normally know. And this is going to surprise a lot of people, and some of you might even find this beneficial. So all those people who had taken checkpoint inhibition treatment, it's not that they just got diabetes and their cancer got cured. What happens is all these gray hairs became black hair. So some of the immune intervention that this checkpoint inhibition therapy does to the roots of these hair is making a gray-haired person develop black hair. This is not just one case. There have been several cases reported. But this makes us realize that your graying is probably immune-related. And this immune-related activity is something that is happening at the root of your hair follicle. So you have two unexpected reaction to the checkpoint inhibition therapy. Of course, people who have cancer will be very happy. They might not might not worry about developing type 1 diabetes. Some of those older people can also get young by their looks. So in conclusion, checkpoint inhibition can induce insulin-dependent diabetes in patients without prior history of diabetes. So you have all kinds of variety of situations. Type 1 diabetes occurring de novo. In patients who are type 2 diabetes and having cancer, they can have type 1 diabetes on top of type 2 diabetes. So there is a bias for patients treated with anti-PD-1 antibody. There are changes in the beta cells in response to immune assault. When exposed to inflammatory cytokines, they express molecules that are associated with immune regulation, such as one of the immune forms of the IDA. In addition, pathways leading to post-translational modification. PD ligand 1 identifies beta cells responding to immune assault and inflammatory cytokines. The PD ligand 1 presenting beta cells are fragile and are more susceptible to killing than PD ligand 1 negative beta cells. Those are the PD ligand 1 negative beta cells are the ones who do not develop type 1 diabetes. So these observations suggest a mechanism whereby non-specific inflammatory mediators may render beta cells susceptible to killing when an autoimmune repertoire is available. So from a clinical perspective, it becomes very important for you to know that there is a new etiology for type 1 diabetes that can hit people at any age group, especially those who are treated with checkpoint inhibition therapy. So with this, I thank you very much for your attention. I thought this is something very important for you to know. You might have read about it or heard about it. A detailed presentation on this, I thought, is so important for you as a practicing clinician. Many of you who are on the Facebook may want to go and like this page called Thoughts on Diabetes, which I run, where I get all the updates on diabetes across all the forms of diabetes, frequently updated. Many of you can get yourself new knowledge on all the recent literature on diabetes, which I curate. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thanks, Dr. Sanjeevi,